Hi, I'm Adam Porter and this is my board gaming vlog, and this is the second video in 2 days. Yesterday's video was about copyright and protecting your board game idea, and it was inspired by a viewer's question, Fanric, and Fanric had asked another question which was about prototyping. So how do you prototype a board game? What constitutes a prototype? What's expected? I don't think there's any right answer to any of those questions, but I have been making prototypes for the last 8 years or so in various different forms. I've tried lots of things out, so I just thought I'd show some examples of the sort of things that I've done over the years. Okay, so this is a extremely early prototype, so a prototype that I might have knocked together. It probably took me an hour or so to knock this together one afternoon, and you can see it's handwritten. I haven't even waited for the ink to dry before I've shuffled. I haven't stayed within the lines, but I've basically produced a working prototype. I've done a few solo tests with this before taking it along to my group, and the great thing about this, it's on blank cards. These are really good, and you can buy them by thousands quite cheaply, and they're so disposable. You know, this game didn't work, I wasn't happy with it, so I put it back on the shelf, never touched it again, and I don't feel that I lost anything. And that's the important thing about making a prototype, is that you make it disposable, certainly for the bulk of your playtesting, so that you can keep changing things, you can write on components, you can tear them up, and it's not going to cause you a huge amount of grief. Some designers will go as far as showing a prototype like this to a publisher. I know a designer who doesn't really do much more than this before they actually get those things in front of publishers, and some publishers don't mind that. I think the important thing is that the game is playable. You know, you're writing, that you must be able to read it. Sometimes people will come to the playtest group and they'll bring along pen and paper prototype, which is absolutely fine, but the writing is so bad that nobody can read it, which means that the whole playtest is people just asking, what does that say, what does that say? And that's no fun. You know, your prototype, even in its most basic form, does have to actually be functional. So that's an extremely early prototype. Once I'm happy with something like that, then I tend to repurpose these sort of chocolate boxes and things for putting prototypes in, and when I actually give something to a publisher, I'd stick a label over something like this, so you know, a simple little label like this stuck onto something makes it into a prototype that I can give to a publisher. So in this chocolate box I have this is probably a playtest 2 or playtest 3 for me. So now I've actually just made the cards a little bit prettier, and you know, nothing too fancy in there, and I've put these are just paper within a card sleeve, so they're not very thick. You know, that's just paper, and then I can pile on more paper as I change things. Let's go back. There's another version of the prototype. So as I change things, I can put extra layers of paper on there, and it makes it a little bit thicker, a little bit more like a card. But the great thing about this is if you have multiple decks in your game, then you can have different coloured backs on the cards without having to go to the extent of actually printing card backs, which is a bit of a pain to do. So there we go. That's another relatively early prototype that never got as far as being shown to a publisher, but just sits on my shelf, maybe to return to one day. I don't know. In terms of a prototype that I actually did show a publisher and got published, this is the prototype for Coco, my trick-taking game about peacocks. And so I made these little card holders here, and I actually had the cards professionally printed for this one. That's not really something that I do very often these days, if at all, because it's very, very expensive. But for this one I made nice quality cards, and I had to hand make these card holders out of cardboard, and I bought the little plastic bit at the base there from a Board Game Extras website. You can tend to find things like that on Google quite easily, and they're very cheap components. And so I made this sort of holder like this that could easily be broken down and put into a small box. Now you'll see these are just cardboard. They're rough around the edges. There's nothing very fancy about it. You can see the sellotape on there. You know, this is not high quality stuff. This is an amateur craft project, because I know that the publisher is going to take all of this stuff, totally rework all the artwork, make everything out of the sort of components and materials that they want, to the standard that they want. So there's no point in me wasting a lot of money and time on it. This is an early prototype of Quazzle, one of my games which has just recently come out. This one has dice in it, and what I do for dice is I buy these blank dice from a website. I just type in blank dice, and you get, they're just plain on every side, and then I print off on sticker sheets and I cut out these little stickers and stick them on by hand. I use these sort of dice all the time, these little plastic dice. I have loads of them in all different colours. And they're really good. I like those. Inexpensive components, and they make quite a nice prototype. This one, you can see I didn't worry about printing cards professionally. These are just on thick paper. They're not even really on card. But obviously in the final product, these will be, well, they were card, components. So nothing super fancy, but some nice graphic design and stuff on there. This is the sort of packaging that I would probably use to give something to a publisher. Just a simple repurposed box, a little sticker on it to explain what the game is. Again, nothing very fancy in there. Okay, so that's another example of a prototype that I've shown to publishers. This one had slightly different packaging. So this one I put in, this was the prototype for Doodle Rush. So I put this in a pencil case. And this one has laminated boards. Okay, so you can see here the light catching it because this board is laminated on one side, but it's matte on the back. I quite like doing that. The way that I do that is I use A4 sticker sheets, so one label per sheet. I'll print onto that, then I'll laminate it, and then when you peel the back off the sheet, you end up with one laminated side and one sticky side that you can stick onto this hard board. And I use mount boards that you'd buy from a craft shop, usually for mounting a painting or a photo or something like that. But I use that because it's a really nice thick cardboard, similar thickness to the sort of components that you might get in a board game. And the great thing about having a laminated board like that is, of course, you can then write on it with dry wipe markers, which and rub it off, clean it off afterwards. So that's when I would tend to do a laminated board. And then this one I've made relatively recently. So let's have a look at this. I don't know if this game's going anywhere, but I would certainly show something like in this sort of form to a publisher. It's a bit rough and ready, but it's perfectly functional. This is just cut out with thick mount board, which I got from a craft shop and held together with glue and sellotape and printed with sticker sheets to create these sort of pyramids. So that's the sort of standard of prototype that I would currently show to a publisher. So this prototype, again, repurposed box from something I found at work, which wasn't being used. So this has a nice little magnet finish. This is a really good box. I really like these. And this one is full of pieces. It's got some of those dice with stickers on them. It's absolutely loaded with different tokens. I might have to cut back on the tokens before I start pursuing this one with any publishers, but there's loads of them, all stuck onto that mount board again. And then here's an example. Here's a bunch of different decks of cards, and they've got different coloured backs because I've used different sleeves for them. So this is a Tabletop Simulator version of my prototype that I've just shown you. And you can see I can sort of zoom in and out. I can pick up components and move them around. I can rotate them, shift them around like this, position them. I can pick up cards and or a whole deck of cards in that instance. I can turn it over and show you here. I can drop it on the board. I can do all sorts of things on this and play an entire game virtually through the internet, which I've never been particularly inspired to do until this COVID-19 lockdown. And so I spent quite a few hours putting this together on Tabletop Simulator just so I can continue to playtest the game, albeit doing it remotely, which has never appealed to me before. This is the second game that I've playtested on Tabletop Simulator, although it's the first one that I've put together myself. The other one was done by a co-designer. And it's a clunky system. It's difficult to kind of shift stuff around and remember all the different controls and everything like that, and you know, it's not as smooth as playing the game in the traditional sort of way, but it is another way of producing a prototype at very little cost, and actually it gives access to playtesters all over the world, of course, rather than just relying on your friends actually turning up to play it with you in your local pub, as I normally would do. So yeah, so you can even do, you know, rolling dice and whatever, you know, all the things that you could do in a normal sort of a normal game, you can do in Tabletop Simulator. Now, with regards to artwork, you should really be looking for Creative Commons artwork, clip art off the internet as much as possible. There's a lot of art out there that's free for you to use without a license. There's a Creative Commons license on it. If you Google that Creative Commons, then you should be able to find that stuff. The long and short of it is really this artwork is purely there as placeholder. Often it just lasts for a single play test, sometimes for, you know, a couple of play tests, and then it's completely changed. I retheme and rechange artwork numerous times throughout the evolution of a game. So I wouldn't go out and commission somebody to make art for me, because then I'm attached to that and it's very hard for me to change the prototype. Even at the point where I've shown it to publishers, they might say to me, okay, I want you to go away, rework it, retheme it. And so I don't really want to have purchased art before I show it to the publisher, because I might have to rework it even then. And once the publisher's seen it, then the artwork that you've put on there shows them the sort of mood of the game. You know, it gives them a feel for what the game should look like. You know, these feathers, I never intended the game to look like this. I just wanted them to get the idea that what we were going for was a slightly whimsical sort of peacock theme with these feathers, and it just sort of lays it out and shows them what you're aiming for. Then the publisher can go away and commission the artist that they want, and make it look the way that they want, and even retheme and do all those sort of things. I hope you found the video useful and enjoyable. If you did, please watch some of my other videos on my channel, Adam's Board Game Wales, or visit me on Twitter @BoardGameWales, or on Board Game Geek, I'm Adam78. Thank you very much for watching. All the best.